Hello and welcome to Where's the Bandwagon? I'm Will and sat alongside me is Ty.
Hello.
And we'll be talking movies and sports and pop culture and games as we try and find out what people are talking about, as we try and find the bandwagon and see what people are jumping on. And I think it's safe to say that this week all the talk has been about the ESL or the European Super League.
Yeah, pretty much all the pundits on every game this week has just been on about the European Super League.
Yeah, I watched so much Sky Sports.
Yeah, and all the backlash that,
that
the owners are going to be facing.
Exactly. And so as you might have guessed, this episode is going to be a sporty episode. So if that doesn't take your fancy, then jump on one of our other podcasts and try and find a topic that's more suited to your tastes. So in this podcast, or in this episode, I'm firstly going to do a brief recap of the Super League, what it is, and then we'll go through a timeline of events from the initial whispers and rumours to the seemingly end or the collapse of the ESL. And throughout we'll give our thoughts because, and the reason we've come up with this format is because, me and Ty were talking before the podcast, and as far as I understand it, your views changed throughout the progression as we learned more about the proposal.
It wasn't throughout, it was before the proposed ESL. The final leg of the PSG Bayern game, the quality was just so good. And I joked that I would like to see a European Super League because I want to see quality games week in, week out, but my worst nightmare happened.
Okay, so here is a quick explanation of the Super League. So European club football draws in big broadcasting rights as it's a widely watched sport. Now, there are domestic leagues such as the English Premier League, the Spanish League, German, Italian, etc. But there's also a European competition called the Champions League, where the biggest clubs from each of these countries play each other for the title of European champion. Now, the biggest clubs, we're talking the Real Madrids, Barcelonas, Bayern Munichs, and the big English clubs like Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, Arsenal. These clubs bring in the big viewers and the big broadcasting rights and money, especially when they play each other, which doesn't happen all that much. But the real kicker here is money. You see, the big clubs don't get the same proportion of money that they bring in, because the money from the tournament goes through the tournament organisers such as FIFA and UEFA, and the money is also shared between all the clubs taking part, including the smaller ones that may not bring in any money at all. There is prize money for winning, but the owners of these big clubs are obviously not happy that they are pulling in the big money, but UEFA and the other small clubs are taking out of their slice. So, the idea of a European Super League was born, where the biggest clubs would break away and be in their own exclusive league, where the clubs in there couldn't be relegated, and you could only be chosen to enter this kind of elite-specific league. Now, there are other terms and conditions and other clubs would be able to join, but that's the base of it. You see, these top clubs would run the league and therefore take home a much higher percentage of the money involved. Now, the problem comes, as we'll see, is the backlash from FIFA and UEFA. They were going to put constraints on it and punish the big clubs, which would damage world football, and the damage that it would also do from other leagues and the economies of these leagues, and damage it would do to the whole sport should this occur. Now, as I say, there are other areas I've missed out, but hopefully we'll go through them as we go through this timeline of events. And we'll go through the timeline now. Just so you know, this timeline is, I'm just going to read through an article written in the Eye, written by James Gray, and I'll link the article in the description. We'll just go through it. So, ideas from the European Super League have been on the table for some years prior. This isn't like a new thing, is it? But
definitely not.
Yeah, but on Sunday, the 18th of April, first at 2 p.m, the Times newspaper reported that Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United and Tottenham, nicknamed the Big Six, are supporting a breakaway to the European Super League. When did you first hear about it? I mean, it's quite a while ago now, but was there a specific point on Twitter or what?
It was the end of a Super Sunday on Sky. I can't remember who was playing, but Roy Keane gave quite a...
Yeah, he was there with Michael Richards, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So that's much...
Straight away you can see there was like strong opposition to it, and at first I just thought it's just a proposal, nothing was going to go ahead. I didn't think it was solid and it was actually going ahead. It wasn't until like the Monday morning that I'd realised.
Yeah. Well, at the point we're at now, which is at 2 p.m, these were just like the first reports coming in.
Yeah.
Later on, about like 7 or 8 o'clock, which we'll get to, because Gary Neville also had a strong thing to say at that time. Even then, we hadn't heard anything concrete from the clubs. Anyway, at 4 p.m. on the Saturday the 18th, Premier League says it condemns any proposal that attacks the principles of open competition and sporting merit. And this brings up one of the biggest issues and talking points that people have with the tournament, which was the lack of relegation, the lack of competition.
Yeah.
So yeah, the fact that the biggest clubs in the world could put themselves in this league and then sign themselves away from any risk was something that actually really was something I was against.
I think that's where most people find fault with that league, really, is that that's something that made it clear that it was about money, so that even if you were terrible this season, you wouldn't get relegated and you would get, what was it, minimum 150 million euros?
I think it was like 400 mil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, right there's no need for... Yes, the football might have been better, but I didn't think it would have turned out better. Yeah. Honestly, in all honesty.
There was something I was listening to, I think it was on the True Geordie podcast. Rory, who's on there, he was saying that, you talk about the idea of relegation. The idea of relegation is brilliant for sport, because relegation brings in jeopardy and drama and something to always be playing for throughout the competition. But when you talk about relegation in business, that is such an uncertain and scary thing. If you're a business person and there's a chance that your club might leave the Premier League, even if... But this year Arsenal were doing terribly, and there was jokes that... they were jokes, but actually...
They were my worst fears at the start of the season, mate.
They were jokes, but it could have happened. Legitimately, you were in a relegation battle for even like a week or whatever it was, when it got really bad. And the idea that the business owner of Arsenal, from taking over a nicknamed Big Six club, that could have gone relegated and lost out on the Premier League money, is scary for business owners. So, that kind of, if they as business people, if they could cut out relegation and the chances of losing out of that money, then they're obviously going to take it. Yeah. At 4:15, so after the Premier League said it condemns the open competition, a joint statement from UEFA, FA in England, and the equivalent FAs in Spain and Italy, plus the Premier League, La Liga, Serie A, all added that they remain united in their efforts to stop this cynical project and were considering all judicial and sporting measures in order to prevent this from happening. So early on, even before the Super League had said that it was going ahead, obviously all the big sporting bodies were riled up, because they all came together and said that they were going to stop this cynical project, which just shows that they knew that it was going to be a big thing, and they were just going to try and cut it off straight at the root.
I think the most frustrating thing at the time on, the Sunday? Was that everyone was opposing the ESL, and like FIFA had said something, UEFA had said something, but none of the clubs had said anything. None of the owners had said anything. People were still in the dark, like, do all the players know about this? Do all the staff know about this? And it was really frustrating, because that's what made me think, it's not going ahead, because none of the owners have said anything that this is going to go ahead.
Yeah, that will be a theme that will continue, is the owners and the clubs not not being vocal in their reports. Right, then we come to the Sky Sports, which is what you alluded to earlier. And Roy Keane, Michael Richards, and more famously almost, Gary Neville, Sky Sports pundit Gary Neville, claims the Big Six should be relegated if they sign up, calling the project an absolute disgrace and a criminal act against fans. Now, one of the important quotes that I took from it was that he was, I'll quote here, he said, "I'm disgusted about Manchester United and Liverpool most. Liverpool, they pretend, you'll never walk alone, and that they're the people's club, the fans' club. And Manchester United, 100 years, born out of workers around here, and they're breaking into a league without competition, without relegation. It's a disgrace." Now, I loved that, because, usually you got Gary Neville is attacking his own club there. You know,
he is,
you see him attacking Liverpool, whatever. That's fair enough. But he's saying that those two big clubs, which are meant to be, in Liverpool's case, you know, the People's Club, the fans' clubs that they call themselves, and Manchester United, that were born out of workers, he was mostly attacking them. Like, did you see any difference between those two clubs and the rest of them?
I mean, let me just go back to what Gary was saying. I think the way that Gary spoke was so outraged about United and Liverpool. I think
And emotional.
every other fan supporting the top 6 club that agreed to join the ESL felt the same way, and even I was saying I wouldn't mind Arsenal getting relegated so that we can teach the owners a lesson.
Yeah.
You know, and what Gary said just resonated with a lot of fans, especially me. I could remember just constantly rewatching that video, reading the comments, and you know.
Yeah, but he was very emotional about it at the time. But yeah, he was very determined to make sure that they are punished, like I've said earlier, to cut it off at the root, to make sure that the owners know that this is actually a diabolical thing that they're doing. It is ripping the history of the game. And another person I was talking about, where it's Liverpool, they're very European-based, you know, European conscious. They hold up 6 fingers and they constantly talk about the history of Europe, of Liverpool and Europe, and that they were going to throw that away for some money. They were going to throw away the history of that and the future of it for money.
Yeah. I think the thing about what Gary was saying as well is these are two the biggest clubs in England. They've won it all. You know, Liverpool pride themselves on being one of the greats in Europe. If they were to go into the ESL, then that would mean nothing to the fans. There'd be no history. There'd be no, Same with United as well. You know, what is it, 13 Premier Leagues? And then it wouldn't matter to those fans anymore. It literally wouldn't matter, because I'm pretty sure in the proposal, you know, the clubs had said that they might field weaker teams in the Premier League if the ESL was to go ahead. So
I've got that in a quote coming later. But and the reason why we're talking about the Premier League and not just the European competitions is, while the European Super League was in direct competition to the Champions League, it was coming out that FIFA and all the governing bodies were going to be so opposed to it that the clubs would be kicked out of the domestic leagues like the Premier League, and therefore not only the history of the European competitions but the history of the domestic competitions was on the line. Now 11:30, here's the big boy. Here's the first time it was actually, I was in bed by this point, I'm an old man, but 11:30, the Big Six announced in a joint statement that they are going to join a new European Super League along with AC Milan, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, Inter Milan, who I think people forget about that were in this a lot just because it goes straight over their heads, Juventus, Real Madrid, and a further 3 clubs that would join ahead of the initial season, which was intended to commence as soon as practicable. Figures of 3 billion were mentioned, so that each club would get £3 billion, and that was to help with the transition process and with COVID or whatever. And 5 English clubs put this statement on their social media feeds. Manchester United are the ones that don't. So 11:30, this is the actual big one. This isn't just an announcement saying this could happen. This is saying that there has been that this has been agreed. These clubs have agreed it. It's not like they're in discussions. It's this is agreed. They've signed up to this. This has happened. I was completely taken back when I woke up and I saw this as an actual thing.
I didn't actually see about that. I think the first time Arsenal ever said anything was just a club statement on the Facebook site. And then that's when I realised that, you know, this isn't a joke. This is actually going ahead. These clubs are serious about it. And
yeah. There's other things coming up as well, like when they announced that JP Morgan would be funding the event, which was that was actually one of the things which made me the most convinced that this was going to happen. JP Morgan, for them to get involved, you have to assume that there was this isn't a ruse by another club, or this isn't blackmail almost from the bigger clubs trying to get UEFA to change. This is a major corporation is in this, and they obviously are financing it.
They're not going to risk it. They had already put up the money and were ready to just go, just waiting for clubs to sign on.
Exactly.
And just get the league going.
And you have to assume that they were They knew that they were going to get this over the line because as a company, you don't risk however many billions on a thing that could not get over the line. They were obviously very convinced this was going to happen.
Very convinced. They just didn't expect a reaction from the football community.
Well,
so negative.
Well, I will. On another thing that we've got that's coming off, we've got a thing that counteracts that point, and there's a point which makes us think that the owners knew just how much backlash they were going to get. So the 11:30 announcement was the last thing to happen on that eventful Sunday. Moving on to Monday, the 19th of April at 7 a.m. Manchester United's Joel Glazer, who is joint co-chairman, hails the project as a new chapter. Now, interestingly, this is something that again was brought up on the True Geordie podcast. Putting a statement out at 11 p.m. and putting a statement out at 7 a.m. Who are they writing those time zone things for? People are in bed by that time. For a Sunday and you've got work the next day. The majority of the country is in bed by 11:30. You put out a statement at 7 p.m. You put out a statement prime time TV. A lot of the podcasts I was listening to was making the assumption that this was trying to become a worldwide league to incorporate America and Asia and the big market into it. And they were making the thing that 11:30 p.m. that time zone's for the Americans.
Yeah, I think it is, but also if you think about it, I think they, at the same time, they wanted a reaction from people, and maybe they didn't get the reaction that they needed. You know, I'm sure they thought about it. You know, we release at 11 p.m. Everyone's asleep. They wake up in the morning. They release another statement. They're on their way to work. They're reading their morning news, and they get to see. And you know, they were hoping that everyone was going to agree with what they put out, but obviously it didn't go that way.
No, I definitely did not go that way. And also, one of the things that was pointed out is that you're talking about your social media feed with Arsenal. The comments made by Joel Glazer were on, if you went on the websites of Liverpool, of Arsenal, Manchester City, Manchester United, Chelsea, the comments by Joel Glazer were on the websites. Can you imagine being a Liverpool fan and looking on your website and a quote from the Manchester United chairman is on your website? Nothing from your board, nothing from your owner, nothing from Jürgen Klopp at the time.
Yeah.
What is going on here? Like we now know that Joel Glazer was one of the leading, or one of the people pushing for this amongst others, and we'll learn about what clubs were very hesitant to join, and we'll talk about that later. But the American owners, such as the Arsenal owner, but Joel Glazer, can you imagine, even you as an Arsenal fan, you wake up and you look on I don't think you did look on the website, but that was plastered over your own website.
I'd be outraged, mate. Honestly,
Glad you didn't see it, otherwise you would have been.
I'm glad that Stan Kroenke hasn't said much. You know, I think it would at this moment in time it would piss a lot of the fans off, a lot of the Arsenal fans off, because we're not having a great season, and then on top of that, our owner is just trying to run away and make as much money as possible. You know.
Yeah. So, at 2 p.m. on the Monday, UEFA President, and I'm going to butcher the names here because it's whatever. UEFA President Alexander Shefrin, I think that's how it's pronounced, says that players who represent clubs in the breakaway competition will be banned from international competitions, describing the lead orchestrators as guilty. Now, this was the first time when I read... This had been suggested, I think I mentioned it earlier, but for the UEFA President to say that throws such a spanner in the works. You've got the Euros coming up. Imagine a Euros without... You think about the international people. You're talking about Kevin De Bruyne, Messi, Ronaldo.
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. Not Messi, obviously. Not in the Euros. But you talk about the biggest players in the Euros. Mbappe and Neymar are probably the biggest two people that wouldn't be... Yeah. That would be at the Euros.
Yeah. Neymar's Brazilian, bro.
Again, okay. Just trying to think of big
Lewandowski. Actually, no. Bayern wasn't in the proposal. Well, but some of the biggest players would not be in the Euros, wrecked. You know. And England wouldn't have a team in the Euros. If you think about if they were to go ahead and just press on with this idea, then England and, you know, UEFA were to ban players in the ESL from playing in the Euros, then England would not have a squad. We'd be playing with people from Championship.
I think it's fair to say that obviously it would be damaging to UEFA and FIFA if these big players didn't play in the Euros, because they wouldn't get as much money. But the obvious reasoning behind announcing this is because they're trying to say to the players, look, if you play in this, you can't follow your dreams of playing for your country.
Yeah.
Now, once I read this, I actually had a vision, and it was kind of a euphoric or like a utopian vision of the big players, and I don't know why, but I kept thinking of Kevin De Bruyne. I don't know why, of Kevin De Bruyne and the big players going, you know what? I'd rather win the Champions League. I'd rather than get. Don't get me wrong, they'd earn more money in the European Super League.
Yeah.
But if you're going to earn 100k a week or 300k a week,
Yeah.
I think. Don't get me wrong, I don't know, but I'd rather earn 100k a week, which is still a stupid amount of money,
It is.
and play for my country.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
think-
I had that utopian vision of the big players leaving the big clubs in the European Super League, Everton having like Ronaldo or whatever, along with James Rodriguez, but having a Kevin De Bruyne and whatever, all the big players coming to the clubs that didn't join the European Super League, and these big clubs getting what they deserve, and the big people that have invested that money would lose a hell of a lot of money. But
I think when the UEFA president first said that, I think that's when a lot of the fans also realised that the players aren't in on this. They don't know about it.
No.
You know, because up until that point, I was assuming that, you know, the whole club had known. And then it was only the fans now finding out about
it's
it.
crazy that they didn't. And
Yeah,
when we hear
it
about,
was.
when we hear from, in the timeline later, when we hear from players and the coaches, they say that, no, I didn't hear about this until you heard about this. Or that they've got a call.
I was quite surprised that
before.
not many players had said anything at that point, though, as well.
Because they
Even-
didn't
yeah.
know, bro. At the time, I think, I haven't got this on the timeline, but Bruno Fernandes was the first player who I saw, which he put on his Instagram story. It was something like "Dreams can't be bought,"
Oh, yeah.
which wasn't a direct hit. Like, that could just be a drifty quote that random people put on it. You know, people put on Instagram all the time, but
It's the timing
it
of
was
it.
kind of like, no, this is definitely a thing. If he didn't mean that, then he's a bit of an idiot. But it was. This wasn't written on the website, but I wanted to point out that Alexander Schäferin here, he is the president of UEFA, and he also in his speech said that was talking about snakes. So he was digging in deep. He was talking about snakes. Now, afterwards, it came out that he was talking specifically about Andrea Agnelli, who is the president. Oh no, sorry, it didn't come out that he was talking about them, but I've kind of everyone's put two and two together.
Okay.
They're talking about Alexander Agnelli. Now, Agnelli is the president of Juventus.
Yeah.
So one of the, not only a founding member of the clubs, but Juventus and Real Madrid were the two big pushers. The two big pushers. Agnelli, who was a big pusher for this breakaway Super League, at the time was chairman of the ECA, which is the European Clubs Association, which is an association to band together the European clubs. So
See, I hadn't known this, yeah.
so of the 200 biggest clubs in Europe, there was a group of them called the ECA, which were to look out for each other. And Agnelli was the chairman of them. And he was the big pusher to then break away. So we're talking about snakes and obviously he's on the board of UEFA a lot. He's in the big talking points. And without telling like Alexander Schäferin and the rest of UEFA, he broke away.
That's very snaky, isn't it?
Well, exactly. I think that's definitely who we're talking about. It is also interesting to note that Alexander Schäferin is the godfather to Agnelli's daughter.
Oh,
So
that is
those two must have been very
so
good
close.
friends.
Yeah.
Like, that is best friends. Imagine, and then, don't get me wrong, business is business, but
You see,
breaking away and ruining what someone else has worked hard for after, like, that is...
At first, when I saw the president said about being snakes, I knew that all these clubs had come together to discuss the new format of the Champions League, and I thought that's what he meant. Like, they had an opportunity there to tell him about the proposals that they had. I just thought he meant that, you know, they snaked him behind his back, but I didn't know it was
Yeah, this dude.
this deep. Like,
This dude.
God.
I know, it is mad. I found that out separately. So, onto the most... I watched a lot of Sky Sports, and I was on their YouTube trying to, like, find, like, big clips they put up.
Yeah.
The best interview, and I'll link it in the description, I can't remember what it was called, but it was an exclusive. Sky Sports, one of the reporters, had an exclusive conversation with one of the board members of one of the 6 Premier League clubs.
Yeah.
Okay, did you watch this interview?
I didn't watch the interview. I just heard them afterwards speaking about a board member of the Big
It is
Six.
mad. It is a mad interview. Don't get me wrong. I don't think journalism in this country has gotten, especially with Sky Sports, has gotten that bad that he'd be faking this. But you never know. So take this with a grain of salt. But he's a very public thing to say. So obviously he couldn't name the board member, but they are a board member of one of the 6 Premier League clubs. So he said, the person that's spoken to him has said that several board members of this particular club were opposed to joining the Super League. So it wasn't just a whitewash of the board members.
Okay.
But they felt like the people that were opposed to joining the Super League felt that they didn't have the power to stop it, which proves that some board members weren't happy about it. I think it's safe to say that the owners and the people making money out of it were the only people pretty much in the world that were wanting this thing to go ahead. The reporter was also told that the owners were fully expecting the backlash, and that they knew that their plans were going to be opposed, and but the board members were told that they weren't worried about bad PR, which goes against what people have been saying, is that, once they realised that there was bad backlash, they came out. No, according to this board member, they knew there was going to be bad backlash. They knew that people weren't going to like it, and they went ahead anyway.
Yeah, but they know that the backlash is going to be this bad, you know?
Doesn't
Obviously,
matter.
you understand, like, there was going to be backlash. There was always going to be backlash.
Well, there's going to be backlash with anything, but if you're on a board and this is a thing that someone's been said to you, they know that it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
So there's also
Or
like,
maybe
a statement
they
that comes out that says that, we weren't prepared for there to be bad, we made a mistake, whatever. No, according to this board member, whatever club this is, they knew that this was going to be a bad thing that people weren't going to like.
I think they maybe expected backlash from the fans, but when like UEFA president started joining, Boris Johnson started joining.
We'll get to that later.
You know, the FA. I mean, and like Gary Neville calling for regulations and whatnot. That's something no business want for their business to be regulated. So maybe that's the type of backlash that made them like start.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe they were talking more about the backlash from the, more like the government. Speaking of businesses, we know that football owners do have a business, but listen to this and tell me this doesn't make your blood boil. So one of these board members quoted one of the owners when they were in a board meeting.
Okay.
This quote says, it wasn't a quoting an owner, it was a quote from one of the board members.
Okay.
Our primary job is to maximise our revenues and profits. The wider good of the game is a secondary concern. Which shows that they knew how damaging this was going to be. To say that out loud, it proves that they knew that this would damage the game of football.
How would you get the profits without having that passion there and that?
Well, it's like if you've got enough money to buy a football club, you're buying. Don't buy a football club for profit. Buy a football club for passion. Buy a football club. Do you get what I mean? If you've got that much money, invest it in something that's going to make money. Fine, but don't do it by tearing out the English game.
A lot of these owners need to start realizing that as much as football is a business, and as fans we have to understand that sometimes as well. Football is a business, but at the same time, the fans still come first.
Yeah.
Passion and football, especially in England, I think Gary Neville said it. It's like tribal almost.
Yeah.
Once you find a team and you watch that team, that's your team for the rest of your life.
Unless they break away into a European Super League. In which case, they can get the F out. That's no.
Oh, that Sunday night I was looking for new teams to support.
What were you thinking? What were you
I was thinking Watford,
Watford, okay.
Yeah. I want to stick with the London route,
I used to like Everton, not like support, but I used to like Everton a lot, and they're obviously doing quite well. But I feel like if I'd chosen Everton, it would have been like Glory Sporting, because they're clearly very good. Like now,
Everton would be like the new Man City.
Yeah, they will, especially when Messi and Ronaldo go there. That's what's going to happen. Another quote that might boil your blood as well, but less so. Said that the owners wanted, this is again from the board member, said the owners wanted less football, not more football. So they would be secretly delighted if the players were banned from playing in competitions like the World Cup and the Euros, because they feel like they are not being rewarded sufficiently. And also, you've got to think about if they're playing for the Euros, they might get injured. But that is just so selfish that they are stopping, that they want their players to be banned from these types of competitions, because they're not getting any money for it. They're my employee, but they're going to work for their country. They're going to play for their country. Yeah. I'm not getting any money. Well, they might get a little bit of money, but they clearly feel like they're not getting paid enough to warrant, their players going off. Sky was also told from this board member that if clubs were allowed to stay in the Premier League, which I think is what they would have preferred.
Yeah.
That the clubs would. I think this is a quote you said earlier. That the clubs would focus on the midweek Super League games and would field weakened teams for the domestic games at the weekend. So they would field weakened teams for the traditional, however many years going domestic English, and then obviously Spanish and Italian.
I think this was the point that really, really pissed me off a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because number one, yes, I'm sure you'd have to pay a lot of money to watch ESL. And then the Premier League would, Sky isn't that expensive. Sky's, 15 quid for the month? And you can watch Sky Football.
I don't know. I personally think that is expensive. The only thing I really subscribe to is, Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
And I was, if the ESL was going to come on, I was like, cross my fingers, please Amazon, buy this and make it free for me. But and with Amazon Prime, it's what? 10 quid, is it 10 quid a month? I'm not entirely sure. I should know. I buy it. I pay for it.
£8 a month.
£8 a month. For that, you get books, magazines, TV shows, some of the best ones, I think, and unlimited photo storage and lots of other things. You're about 15 quid a month just for Sky Sports.
Yeah, but you get to watch all the sports.
I know you get to watch sports.
I know you're just into football only, but it's golf.
Exactly. But 15 quid a month, I think, is ridiculous, especially if you're talking about the working class. If you're talking about the working class clubs that were built by Manchester United and Liverpool, and now they're being sold to people that if you were struggling for money, you ain't paying 15 quid a month for Sky Sports.
Probably not. No.
So there you go. And would there be a match of the day equivalent for you to be able to watch for free later? Who knows?
For the European Super League, probably not.
Well, exactly. They're not going to sell the rights, especially to the BBC. In the same interview, there was a quote, or not quote, but it was said that the deal and the idea was being driven by the Glazers, American owners, and JP Morgan. And one thing that made me really annoyed, especially with American owners, they're trying to. A lot of people quoted saying that the ESL was the attempt to turn it into the NFL or franchises, especially when you talk about the lower relegations. I'll explain a little bit later why I think that that's not the same. With NFL, you had 32 teams. They play each other completely differently. There's a system where you play the people in your division a lot, but you randomly play other teams, which means it's fresh every year. It's different. If there were only 20 teams or 14 of the same teams every single year, there's going to be a point where it doesn't get boring, but the beauty of them playing each other so sparsely in the years is that event comes up. Wow. Manchester United versus Barcelona, Manchester United versus Real Madrid. 2 years ago, however long it happened, it doesn't. Same reason why the World Cup's every 4 years and the Olympics. If the World Cup was every year, it would be less special. That's just a fact.
See, I hadn't thought about it that way.
That is one of the things that drove me insane. I was like, I think very much long term. I'm like, 5 years, if we've seen Real Madrid win this ESL and not lose a game in 5 years, I'm going to be bored of this.
That's an interesting point, to be fair. I hadn't thought about that at all. There'd be... It's very short term, the ESL. It wasn't looking, as you said, long term. People get bored quite easily.
I think people would still turn out, but it's the competition. So people will always be excited for Real Madrid versus Barcelona. But if everyone knows who's going to win. Okay, put this a futuristic prediction to you. Real Madrid win the first 3 ones. They get the however many millions of pounds extra for winning the European Super League. Real Madrid have all the money now. They can then afford to buy all the best players because they've got more. They can pay them more than the rest of the clubs. Imagine if the European Super League turned out like the French League, where PSG are going to win it every year. But he's with the biggest clubs.
That would be so
Can you imagine
boring. The thing is, there's that risk of that happening. I don't think these clubs owners thought that out a lot. You could tell that they've not been involved in football, or whether that's playing at a young age, or they've just not been involved in it.
Hilariously, this next point is about the Americans. This is hilarious, by the way. The board member, I'm still on the Sky News interview because I think it's worth talking about more. Yeah. The board member said that some of the American owners still can't get their head around why we have a relegation system in English football. Quote, they just can't get their heads around the concept.
Oh my god!
Like, which is a bit unfair because it makes it out to be the stupid American stereotype that you get. But and we've discussed earlier about relegation with business between football. But oh my goodness,
I
what
find
a
that
quote.
quite funny because Americans always talking about American dream, and the American dream is literally coming up from a struggle.
Yeah.
Leicester winning the Premier League, that's coming up from a struggle. That's literally on the brink of relegation to winning the Premier League the following season.
Yeah, we went from Nigel Pearson talking about ostrich sticking your head in the sand to the reporter, to the next year they won the Premier League. And one of the points I said to you when we were chatting in the car was, if this had happened, what year? That's one in 2016, isn't it?
Yeah, 2016.
If this had happened 5 years earlier, which is a long time, but if it happened 5 years earlier, there would be no Leicester winning the Premier League.
Yeah.
They might have won the Premier League, but that's not the same thing if the big six clubs aren't in there. If Liverpool, Manchester City and Chelsea on there, Liverpool winning the Premier League is not as a big thing. This happens 5 years earlier. That 5,000 to 1 Leicester winning the Premier League, and the amazing advertisement that Premier League got of saying that anyone can win.
Anyone can win it. Yeah.
That doesn't happen. That magical moment in sport does not happen. And that means that if this has happened, more of those magical moments are being denied.
I think the most impressive thing about that season as well is that Leicester were beating the top 6 teams quite easily.
Yeah.
They are all class in them every
Through ball
time.
Jamie Vardy.
Yeah. And right to the start of the season, 5-4 to Leicester United. Leicester won that game 5 goals to 4. Things like that. Throughout that whole season is why the European Super League would be wrong. Everything that went through that season. Aston Villa, one of England's greatest club, went down that year.
Yeah.
Leicester winning the league that year. It just shows how crazy football can get. And if you were to just take away a relegation system, then it'd just be boring. It'd just be, here we go again, Real Madrid, Barcelona. It would be fun to start with. It would be fun. I'm sure people would pay money for the first 2-3 years, but after a while, it's like,
same again.
Here we go again.
Yeah.
And the quality would not be the same constantly.
No, I know. Yeah. And I still personally think that it would get to the point where the best club would win like the first year and get so much money that they could then buy Haaland and Mbappe, and not only buy them but pay for them, pay their wages to make sure they come to their club. Everything gets sucked into that biggest club, and then they just walk away happy.
Also, if the ESL had gone ahead, then what about like the clubs that finish lower down on the table? Surely they'd lose money because their fans might switch.
You mean in the Super League? Or
in
out?
the Super League. The Super League.
I'm not sure about switch, but if you're talking about
not switch, but if you think about how it's set up in, let me think, the NFL, like the Browns for 16 years. They had like loyal supporters, but for 16 years, no one knew who the Browns were. I didn't know the Browns were a team. I started watching NFL in 2011. I didn't really find out about the Browns until they had Baker Mayfield and they were doing better.
Yeah, I think the Browns is an exception because they were so terrible that they were like everyone knew about them. But I know what you mean. If a team gets better, I was laughing personally at Arsenal and Tottenham and the memes that were coming out of that, because imagine you're an Arsenal fan. Picture this. I'm very future predictive because I quite like picturing this. Right, close your eyes. Picture a scene with this. Say I can't remember the format, but basically I think. The pundit that I'm basically stealing this idea from, it basically said that if you lose the first 3 games, there's no chance of you winning because you basically can't get to the knockout stages. Whatever. You're Arsenal, you lose the first 3 games of the season. You've then got to play Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester United, Manchester City with no motivation because you can't get relegated. Are you going to watch those games where you're going to get trashed 7-0 by
What's the point?
What's the point? What is the point?
The season's literally finished right at the start.
Exactly. And imagine that every single season. Because you're losing. You're not getting as much money as Real Madrid, who's winning the league every year. You're not then going to go and buy... There's no way you're buying Mbappe anyway, but there's no way you're buying Mbappe now.
The thing is, I don't get why Arsenal is in it. We've got money at the moment.
Yeah, that's another discussion.
We're not spending it. So our owners getting more money they wouldn't be spending the money on the club. They just want to fill their own pockets.
There's also, listen to this I can't remember who this was. This is kind of like a big brain play for... I can't remember, what's the name of your owner?
Stan Kroenke.
Kroenke, right. You're Stan Kroenke, you buy Arsenal Football Club. From that moment, you know that you're going to get into a European Super League where there's no chance of you getting relegated. Why are you going to spend any money on players? Because you're not going to get relegated.
No.
Why would you put money into the club when you know that you're not going to get punished for it by getting relegated?
You guaranteed what 3 billion?
You get 3 billion,
to start
3.5 billion or 3 billion, the quote's a bit whatever, to join for the initial.
Yeah.
And then it was 400 million per season. What accordingly, it was said. Just to put that in perspective, if you win the UEFA Champions League, you get 140 million. Just by being and finishing last in the
European Super
you get
League.
400 million. As Stan Kroenke, I'm going to mispronounce his name. Why are you putting any money in this? You're going to get 400 million pounds. You're not going to put any of that back into buying more players. We'll whack, we'll whack the same team out. Maybe we'll buy Jack Grealish just to please you, but he's not going to want to come because he wants to play for England.
It'll just be a load of young players then.
Well, it'd just be a load of the cheapest players ever who are going to get thrashed 7-0 by Mbappe, who now plays for Real Madrid and is winning every game. The last quote from this interview before we move on, we've been dragging a long time with this interview, but I think it's very important to get out. He said that, and this comes down to a bit of the 6 clubs. Now that everyone's pulled out, spoiler alert, by the way, everyone's pulled out of the thing. Fans are now tussling each other to say, "Oh, well, our club pulled out first, or our club didn't really want to go into it." Listen to this quote, and this is I'm a Chelsea supporter, by the way. This quote was basically saying that I've said that the Glazers and the American owners were the most driven. Heading all of this were the Real Madrid president and the Juventus president. He said that Manchester City and Chelsea had reservations about joining the Super League, but felt that they could not afford to be left out of the ESL and be left in a weakened Champions League and Premier League, which makes sense, because I think it's fair to say that Manchester City and Chelsea have been... Everyone forgets about Tottenham, because they do, but Manchester City and Chelsea, everyone's saying that they were the least, they still can be blamed. I'm not saying they shouldn't be blamed, and this doesn't mean anything to me, but they're saying that they felt like, as business people, if you're going to be left out of the Premier League, let's face it, Chelsea, if they stay in the Premier League, they're going to do better than they've been doing before without Liverpool, City, United, whatever. But the money in the Premier League is going to be so much lower without United, without Liverpool. And the Champions League, yes, it will still have PSG and Bayern Munich, who... Fantastic. The system that they have in Germany is fantastic, with the fact that the fans own the majority of the club. But what do you think of that? The fact that imagine you're Manchester City and Chelsea, and you've been invited to this thing. They've said it's happening. JP Morgan have financed this.
I think Gary Neville, it was on that Sunday night, he said it best that Man City and Chelsea were basically backed into a corner because all the 4 richest club in the Premier League, so to say, came to them with this proposal, and yes, they might have said, "We don't think this will go down well" or whatever, but also they didn't have a choice, On one hand, yes, they were thinking, it's not going to go down well and whatnot, but on the other hand, it's like, we don't want to miss out on this business opportunity. There's a lot of money right here to be made.
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's the fact that they can't miss, that they didn't want to, they had FOMO about missing out on the European Super League. I think they were scared about how little money they'd get if they stayed in a weakened Champions League. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they knew how much money there was going to be, and they were like, "No, it's all right." They saw that people weren't there, and they were like, "Oh, actually, we're not going because we love that so much. We're going because actually, if we stay here, we're going to make." Right. The rest of the day, so Liverpool were playing that night, but at 3 p.m, Premier League called a meeting to invite the 14 clubs not involved in the Breakaway project to a meeting the next morning. At 6:30 p.m, Duke of Cambridge, the president of FA, Prince William, tweets his concerns for the football community over the Super League plans. At 7:20 p.m, just before the kickoff between Liverpool and Leeds, Liverpool manager Jürgen Klopp, who had previously spoken about the idea of a breakaway European League, tells Sky Sports that his opinion didn't change. So what they're referring to there is the year before, he was talking about how he was really opposed to the European Super League. I like Jürgen Klopp, but I listened to this interview and it was weak. Okay, it was really, really weak. So he said...
Interesting that. I thought it was a very strong
the quote that was plastered over all the newspapers was that his opinion didn't change. Do you know why that was the title? Because he didn't say anything else that was damning. Saying your opinion didn't change is the weakest way of saying I'm opposed to this. He did not go and say, this is a terrible idea. He did not go and say, this is terrible. He just said, oh, my opinion didn't change. And then went on and tried to change the subject by attacking Gary Neville. So what happened there is that
Oh,
Gary
yeah.
Neville, when he was on his rant the day before, he said, when I think I quoted it, he said that Liverpool said, you never walk alone. And Jürgen Klopp attacked him for that by saying, but Gary Neville then, in the same sentence, was attacking his own club.
He was, yeah.
So Jürgen Klopp is just being ridiculous and trying to change the subject. Again, I like him. I think he's amazing, but I think he could have... He was the first person who had to go and speak to the press.
I'm not going to lie. When you say it like that, I think about it. Even now that it's all over, it seems like he knew about it. If you think about...
I don't know.
That interview to start with, and then after it was all finished, he was saying we should just forget about it and move on.
Yeah.
Because, was it the fans were still protesting at their games?
Of course,
or
they were
planning
protesting.
to protest.
Yeah, they were tearing down the "You'll Never Walk Alone" signs from Anfield.
So he was saying that we should just forget about it and move on.
Yeah, I think I was really disappointed in that. It was the first time that anyone had to go for an interview because it was a pre-match interview, and they were asked directly, and the only thing he could say was, "My opinion did not change," which is the weakest thing.
You'd expect more from a Liverpool manager.
Exactly.
Liverpool.
Speaking of, the first player that was then interviewed after was James Milner, who said I was very proud of him because he said that. Sorry, I'll just read it out. At 10 p.m, so this is after the match, James Milner becomes the first player who would be due to feature in the competition to speak out against it, saying that I don't like it and hopefully it doesn't happen. That is a more precise thing. You don't say my opinion didn't change. And I think Patrick Bamford was also interviewed, and they were wearing Football for the Fans t-shirts, whatever. 10:20 p.m, tensions run high after the matches. Klopp and Neville clash, with the German unhappy of the former England defender questioning the use of "You'll Never Walk Alone." We've talked about that. I think it's ridiculous. We come to Tuesday, the final day. It's 2 days earlier, and it's all about to come down. At midnight, so this is on the Tuesday, European Super League chairman Florentino Pérez, who is also the president of Real Madrid, explains that they could not be kicked from the Champions League, claiming that the law protects us. So I think he's talking more about the current Champions League season, because it was... if they get kicked out, PSG automatically win because Chelsea and Manchester City in there. So he basically says that. There's some more about Everton, who were very vocal about, against the project, which is good. 12:30, Prime Minister Boris Johnson tells authorities that no action by the government is off the table in seeking to block the project. Don't want to get into politics, and I think it's safe to say that I'm very much not a huge fan of Boris Johnson, but I have to say that him and the sporting people did very well to acknowledge that people were going to vote for him if he cancelled this Super League. So fair play to him. I don't care. He did well.
I think he just wanted to save the UK economy as well.
Exactly. The Premier League brings in so much money. It's crazy. Even though it's run by even though you have an American owner, and they're obviously not putting that into the British economy, you have to worry about that. But in another podcast I was listening to talking about this, they were talking about what could those sanctions possibly be, and I come up with a couple. First of all, you have to have a license to operate as a Premier League, to put on a big match.
Okay.
But in the podcast, they were saying, who's to stop the American owners moving Arsenal Football Club to Miami? Who is to stop them from moving?
I think that was one of my first biggest fears, is that
Arsenal would become
all these fans
Arsenal.
are like after the night, and everyone was outraged and whatnot. It's like, and then they were still pressing on with it. Like Tuesday morning, they were still pressing on. I was like, that's why I was looking for another club. I just thought,
so was I.
Arsenal are gone. They're gonna. Arsenal could be it might. It's not called London FC. It's called Arsenal.
Yeah.
Arsenal Football Club. So it could be Arsenal Football Club in LA.
I mean, it's a bit different with Chelsea or Manchester United because they're physical places.
Yeah, physical places.
Yeah, I was the same. I was very much so disappointed in the fact that my club was involved in this thing. That I was looking into other clubs. I didn't look into other clubs. I basically told myself that if this had happened, I'm moving. Other things that the government could have done. A small one is that was brought up was the fact that when you talk about police, football fans are rowdy, and it's one of the things I actually it's quite dangerous at sporting events if fans clash. Yeah. The fact that the police and police horses and guards go up, that comes out of taxpayers' money, so that could be taken away. That's a small thing, people can hire their own security. Don't think it would happen, but whatever. And the big one was that they could physically block transfers. Now, I read this somewhere, I don't know how true it would be, but they would physically block transfers if, say Manchester United wanted to buy a player from Europe,
Oh.
Sorry, that's what I meant to say. European transfers they could block, which would be damaging. 1:30 p.m. Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola questions the sporting merits of the league, saying it's not a sport where success is already guaranteed. I loved that quote. I listened to it loads of times. That interview, it's fantastic. At 2 p.m, PSG said something not important. Very well done for PSG and the German clubs not get involved. 2:10, 14 Premier League clubs that aren't involved unanimously and vigorously reject the Super League plans, and they're considering all actions available to prevent it from progressing. This is where things were basically like, this is going to be over. Chelsea had a match that evening, and a large group, there's no fans in the stadiums, but a large group of fans gathered outside Chelsea's Stamford Bridge before their goalless draw against Brighton to protest their involvement in the league. So they basically stopped the players coming in. Now, during this, and I was amazed to see this, did you see Petr Čech got out of the...
Yeah.
That was amazing. Now, so they're basically, the Chelsea supporters are blocking the buses from getting into the stadium.
Yeah.
Petr Čech, who's... can't remember his exact role, but he's one of the supporting coaches of Chelsea club. He comes out and speaks to the players, saying, I can't remember what he said exactly, but he was basically saying, "Let us in," and saying, "We will sort this."
Yeah.
A weird quote to hear from someone who's high up in, high up in Chelsea, but he's involved. Saying, "We will sort this," and he's a Chelsea legend. He's not going to go and lie to them about saying this just to get the coaches in. At 9 p.m, Jordan Henderson, who's captain of Liverpool, who had met with other captains of the Premier League, they had a Zoom meeting, tweeted saying that we don't like it, which talking about the Super League, we don't want it to happen. This is our collective decision. That is incredible. Talking about the fact that the captains of these big Super League clubs,
it's the first time that all of the players have pretty much said.
Well, I think it's fair to say that nobody wanted this. Even the players don't want it. They didn't want it. At the time of the Petr Čech thing happening, sorry to go back in time, there had been reports that Chelsea were pulling out of the thing, and I don't know, out of the European Super League. Don't know if that was because of the comments of Petr Čech or whether other reports, but that was very much
didn't it happen after the buses were let in and the protesters were still outside?
That was when the first reports came. Officially not yet, but interestingly, on this timeline I've got here, it's come up with that Ed Woodward's confirmation that he will be stepping down came before any clubs pulled out. Yeah. So I think this timeline is official stuff.
Yeah.
And so officially Chelsea didn't put out a statement until blah, blah, blah.
After the game it was.
And also just a quick word on that, Manchester United fans will be praying to the gods, singing hallelujah that Ed Woodward stepped down. But according to United, the statement, I think it said that he was planning to step down regardless, which might have been a bit of a ruse. I don't know, but that's something to think about. And then there's another thing with when clubs at this point pulling out, 9:25, 10:50, clubs pulling out. Another thing about people trying to pull back brownie points for their own clubs. Who pulled out first? I think everyone thinks that Chelsea pulled out first.
It was Manchester City officially.
Well, according to this, it was officially. Well, yeah. I think it would have been, as a Chelsea fan, I think it would have been Manchester City first.
Yeah.
But the fact that Chelsea had a game.
Yeah.
Put Chelsea in everyone's mind. So Manchester City and Chelsea, certainly the first two to pull out. I think Manchester City did it first, but because Chelsea had a game and everyone was talking about them and Petr Čech, I think that's why Chelsea's came out first.
Yeah.
And then at 10:50, all the other clubs announced that they will end their involvement, and they apologised to their fans.
It wasn't an apology
on the next day,
from Arsenal.
On the next day, the next day, sorry, there were...
Oh, no, mate, I'm still waiting for my apology.
Oh, is Arsenal...
No.
Well, that's hilarious. As if you haven't had as much pain yourself as an Arsenal fan.
Arsenal has not... Yeah, Stan Kroenke.
You're probably going to have a quote from a Glazer on your website.
Or CEO came... No, not a CEO. Whoever... Can't remember. I don't know how to say his name, actually.
No.
He came out and he didn't really apologise. He's just... Yeah, he just gave a statement. And it was like, yeah, that's that. That's it. We're finished. And then I think he was asked about if they're prepared to sell the club, and he said no.
Yeah. So that was on Tuesday, the 20th of April. The state of play now is that all clubs except for Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus have officially pulled out of the league, the European Super League. Juventus and Real Madrid presidents obviously being the main pushers in the first place. I'm not entirely sure why Barcelona is still in there in terms of the fact that their involvement wasn't as big as Real Madrid or Juventus. You can see why those two are left in there. So yeah, state of play. It's the 26th as we record this now. Not much has happened since. I've seen that there's an amazing Twitter account which is called "Things That Lasted Longer Than the Super League," and he just posts things like, "Oh, there was a tennis match in Wimbledon that lasted like 2.5 days, and it was longer than the Super League." And also, I've seen the kind of meme that the Real Madrid president kept talking about buying Mbappe and Haaland.
Yeah,
there was kind of a conspiracy theory where he set up this whole Super League to get clubs to sign in, to make it fail. Let me backtrack and say that when clubs left this place, they had to pay a huge fine. So they haven't paid it yet, but as part of their contract of signing up, they couldn't leave unless they paid a huge fine. And what some big brain fan came up with the conspiracy theory that the Real Madrid president wanted everyone to leave so that he could get the money of them pulling out to then go and buy Mbappe and Haaland. Obviously, this is complete speculation.
No, they're just going to dominate Europe for the next 5-6. I mean, they've done that already for like last 5-6 years.
Pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty shameful, and I don't think we touched on this, but actually have, Chelsea and Man City didn't need to join this. However, all the other teams that had joined it were in some sort of trouble,
Or in debt.
Barcelona is $1 billion in debt. Real Madrid are in debt. Inter Milan, as you said, you don't know why they're in there. Well, their owners who own the Chinese Super League team as well. Yeah. That got shut down. They needed the money.
Yeah. Who knows? All right. We've come to the end of the timeline. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Any points? I think we've managed to cover quite a lot.
We've covered quite a lot in this.
Yeah, so thanks for listening to our first podcast of Where's the Bandwagon. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. That'd be fantastic. It really would help us as we are a new and a very baby podcast. You can follow us on our social media accounts. We've got on Twitter at @S_bandwagon and Where's the Bandwagon on Instagram. And also I'll be posting clips of the podcast so you don't have to listen to the whole hour on our YouTube channel, which will be Where's the Bandwagon. Our next podcast, not sure when that'll be, and we actually don't know what it's going to be about, but it could be Batman movie, could be about a game, could be about Cyberpunk, could be about Arsenal's takeover by Thierry Henry and Spotify.
Could be about gaming. Yeah.
Could be about anything. Subscribe and join us if you want to listen to that. If you've got any ideas about what you want us to talk about, then please contact us on the social media accounts. Thank you for listening, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye.